I was invited to speak to the professional photographers of Middle Tennessee in June of 2024. What follows is a recorded version of my presentation in which I discussed the business of making and selling prints. I talked about how I got started and some aspects of my business and decision-making process along the way. Attendance was great with an overflow crowd in the small meeting room at the Pixel Connection camera store in Nashville, Tennessee. Many thanks to the PPMT and to the Pixel Connection for hosting me, and to all the nice and attentive folks who came out to see me speak, especially the people who told me that they came to see the presentation because they knew me from YouTube. It was great seeing you there. I'm Keith Dotson. I'm your speaker tonight. Thank you so much for coming. I had this nightmare there'd be no one here. I'd be giving a speech to Tina. The purpose of this speech is to talk about how I, who am not really a formally trained photographer, got a career selling prints in black and white. We can also talk about anything else you want to talk about. In fact, my next slide says, please ask questions anytime. Jump right in, ask me anything you want to know. Happy to answer it if I can. As I already said, the purpose of this is to talk about black and white photography. It's up to you, whatever you want. They're fine with me. Can everybody see?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Do we need to scoot in?
Yeah, please come in
They're
if you can.
Okay.
They're okay.
Yeah.
They like the air.
I'm with them on that. I have a pretty good career selling prints, and I have the feeling that a lot of people, even pros, may not do a lot of prints anymore. I know there are some photographers in here. Do y'all make prints?
Yeah.
Good, good. Sell prints?
Yeah.
Good. Everybody else?
Some more albums than prints, but.
Good, good. I know a lot of photographers, especially enthusiasts and amateurs, maybe never make a print. You know, it's Instagram, the hard drive, and that's about it. So I wanted to talk about prints really tonight. First, I want to talk about what is a fine art photographer. That's kind of what I call myself, if I call myself anything. It's kind of a controversial term in some circles, but all I mean by that is I don't do commercial work, I don't do weddings, I don't do anything like that. My photographs are intended to hang on the wall in a frame, if anything. I do sometimes have work get used in a commercial context or maybe licensed, but that's just strictly because someone has asked me to do it. It's not because I do that as a goal. What I love about what I do is I take the pictures I want to take, and if somebody likes it, they are welcome to buy something. If not, then that's okay too. A little bit about myself. That's me. I was an Army brat, and I moved a lot when I was very young, and as a result I developed a lifelong wanderlust. And I'm telling you these things because I think they play into what I'm doing now. I was an artistic child, but I didn't really know I was an artistic child until I was in kindergarten, maybe first grade, and I'll show you this. This was some artwork we did in class. I remember this day very well. I think you would agree this does not have any telltale signs of artistic talent. No one would look at this and say, this is a future artistic genius or anything like that. But I had a teacher's assistant or someone in the class that day who came by and praised this so thoroughly and told me, you must be an artist and all this. And I can tell you what, that stuck with me to this day. Just that little bit of praise probably changed my life because, you know, my dad was a military guy. This photo was taken in 1965, probably in Germany. And that's the environment I grew up in. Who knows what I would have done had it not been for that woman in my class. I learned to do darkroom work in the high school. Not very well, but I got the basics of it. When I graduated high school, I decided to go to art school. I wanted to be something artistic, but I wanted to make a living, so I thought I would maybe be a cartoonist or whatever. Wound up studying graphic design, and I worked in advertising for a long, long time. I was an art director, and I worked with a lot of professional photographers. But for my artistic fun after hours, I pursued painting. Tried it all, you know, acrylics, oil paints, watercolors, drawing. Interestingly, toward the end of what I was doing there, I was doing a whole lot of black and white drawings with pencil or charcoal that looked a lot like the photographs I take now. But how photography played into this was I continued using my camera, you know, making prints on film in those days and getting these kind of things. You know, I'm sure you remember these from the drugstore with the negatives and everything. And of course, I lived in Texas, so we had the Texas-sized prints. They even put them a little portfolio for you, which is awesome, you know. I think these are 3x5 maybe, and these are 4x6, so, you know, big. The photographs were either, you know, from family vacations, just, you know, snapshots, or I would use them for reference for my work, which sounds like maybe what you do sometimes. You take your photos home and use them for artwork references. 2005, age 42, I was going through a lot of life changes, had a marriage falling apart and things like that. And I went on a trip with the camera. And on that trip, I took some photographs that for the first time I looked at as potentially being a new artistic direction for me. I was so happy with them that I actually stopped drawing and focused 100% on photography. In that time, since 2005, I've done everything I can to learn photography. I mean, I think I've probably given myself like this DIY MFA along the way, because I'll read old journals from like the 1880s on how to make albumin prints and stuff like that. That's how nerdy I am. And I also collect a lot of old photographs from antique shops, and I go and try to study who was the photographer, you know, where did they live, what did they do, and so I just really have learned everything I can. Some of the things that happened to me along the way since 2005, I have worked still, as far as I know, to this day on Grey's Anatomy. It's been on there for 5 or 6 seasons. I picked this screenshot because most of the time all you see on Grey's Anatomy is about this much of it, because they're talking, you know, to Meredith Grey in her bed or whatever. But in this one particular episode, they had this weird plot thing where she was talking about her wallpaper. And so they really highlighted my photographs. And I was like, oh, finally. A couple of years ago, Ken Burns honored me by including 2 of my photographs in his book called Our America. That was a project that took 7 years to come to fruition, believe it or not. Got halted by the pandemic and various other things. The person I worked with was not Ken Burns, it was one of his assistants. I think she really liked me, so she included 2 of my photographs in there, which I was the only one who had 2 photographs. Sally Mann is a couple of pages in front of me, and she only had 1. I've also been very honored to be in a few magazines along the way, just small regional magazines in Memphis, Naples, Florida, and Santa Fe, things like that. Last year I had an exhibition at the Longview House in New Orleans, and I have a good client in Milwaukee, and this client is an attorney, opened up a new office in a historic building, had a lot of space, and bought probably 25 or 30 large prints from me. So a great client. But in addition to that, the client offered to have a party as a part of Milwaukee's art night, or whatever they call it, their art walk, where businesses can host an artist and people can come in off the streets and have some wine or whatever and look at the art. Well, in this case, the person had bought my art and put it on the walls for this purpose. And so a crowd turned out, clients and people off the street and whatever. And I'm telling you this because I'm very nervous right now. I do not speak in public, ever. Not since, like...
You're doing a great job.
Thank you. And I
Listening.
thought this was a funny story because I was there, Tina was with me, a large crowd, and I'm a very introverted person. So I was standing around, didn't know what to do, and I heard people saying, has anyone seen the artist? Who's the artist? I want to talk to the artist, and I would be right next to them and didn't say a word. So no one ever knew the artist. But Tina, Tina, on the other hand, was really working the crowd for me. He's like, I'm with him, I know him, I can take care of him. I've had a few celebrity clients buy my photographs on the way. I won't say who they are, but some of them are in Nashville, and that's a big honor, of course, too. We have to talk about gear real quick. My gear is, I use a Sony a7R5 or R4. Been using it for about, well, a number of years. It's my workhorse camera. I got it because of the resolution. Recently I picked up a Fujifilm GFX 100S, also because of the resolution. And the reason for me to always want more resolution is because I sell a lot of very large prints. That's a 5x7, I think it was. If you look close, you can tell.
Feet, not inches, right?
Feet, yes. It looked pretty good at a normal viewing distance, but honestly, it was kind of messy up close. And that was, I think, shot on my old Canon 5D Mark III. So big enlargement from that, and I'm always trying to get the most megapixels I can. Here's another example of some large prints. I can't remember the size on these, but that was a diptych made out of 1 frame. So in other words, half of it was enlarged, you know, to that size and split. So
how big is that? That's huge.
I can't remember the size, but it's very large. That's another view of it, so you can kind of get scale in, you know, environment like that, how big it was. And there's another one from the same project, cut into 4 pieces. Not a very glamorous environment, but it was a great project. I also love shooting film, mostly just for fun. I love shooting the Hasselblad, especially. It's just so amazing to look through that viewfinder. I never could get used to the looking down in it thing, so I got this prism finder, but the body was made in 1977, the lens in 1994, and the film back in 1980, and they're all just working amazingly well. I love that camera. Also have this one because of the 6x9 negative. And I also have a bunch of other cameras I just have just because, and I just love to take them out sometimes and use them. Just FYI, for my sites and socials, I have a main website. This is my e-commerce website, keithdotson.com. This is my business website, and I established this website for a number of reasons I'll talk about a little more later. But this is where I do business, and it's where my portfolio is. I also have a blog, icatchshadows.com. You'll notice that's a different URL. Most people try to keep their blog and their website in the same place. I did this for a reason. I'm happy to talk about it if anybody wants to know. But that's my blog, and it is photography related also, but it's not a portfolio. I have a YouTube channel. This is a sample of one of my thumbnails. Tina and I go all over the place and take pictures and record where we've been, and it has landscape photography on it and abandoned places photography mostly. I also have a podcast, because, you know, why not? I'm not very good about keeping it up to date, but it has been surprisingly popular. I get more feedback from that than from any other thing I do when I actually put out episodes. Instagram at Keith Dotson, and one of the things I love about my job is I get to travel. This was taken in the Union Level ghost town of Virginia. I had gone out there to make a video and shoot some pictures of all these abandoned buildings. They're all in a row. This is basically like an abandoned town on a main street, and nothing still has any business in it there. I made a video. I went and did my research and learned what every single one of these buildings was for. Ultimately, they all were stores in the end, but various things. This was a dance hall and various things. I got invited to come back by this gentleman, Jimmy Thompson, who lives there now. He grew up there and he left for years and moved back, and he inherited some property. He lives on a beautiful farm, and he inherited a few of these buildings. And he invited me to come back out and Tina to come back out and learn the history that he knew. And I was so intrigued by this because I shoot a lot of abandoned buildings and abandoned places, and sometimes I can find some history, but you never get that kernel of what it was like for the people there. And that's what I got from Jimmy. He told me stories. He knew all the people who owned these businesses, and he knew the history, what happened there, and he told me a really evocative story about he lived in a house right across the street from that red building right over here when he was a boy, and of course it was summertime and no air conditioning, so his windows were open, and on Saturday mornings he would hear the screen door slamming, people going in and out to get drinks or whatever before they would go work the fields on Saturday. But he said that he invited me to come out because he thought these buildings were going to start to vanish pretty soon. And he was right. Actually, this red wooden building was a dance hall back in the day. I don't know what else it was, but there's still a stage in the back. And that's now been bulldozed and buried. And this right here, kind of behind the tree, right by my chin, you can see there was another one that was a post office originally, and then later on I think it was a convenience store or something. It's also gone now. And I think the rest are probably not far behind. As you can see, several of them are standing wide open, which means people can go in. It's not safe, and so I doubt if it'll be long before they're all gone. But it's really interesting to go to a place where you have all these, you know, there's basically just a town that's it's just like empty. It's not that it's quiet. There's a lot of traffic there, but it was really a treat to meet Jimmy and to learn about those places. Sometimes my office isn't so nice though, and I go to places like this as well. It doesn't usually have this kind of stuff in it, but that was pretty cool. By the way, I had permission to be there. Quick jump through some of my work samples I just pulled for you guys. I'm not going to dwell on this. I just wanted to kind of show you some of the things I do. All black and white. This leaf skeleton here, I went through a phase where I was shooting a lot of leaf skeletons. And it depends largely on where I find them or not. But this is actually 3 leaves that are all kind of merged together. You can never get them apart now, but there's one, and there's one, and there's one. And the 3 of them together are about the size of my thumb. So it's very small. And I love the idea that someday that could be really big on somebody's wall, possibly. So I'll go through these very quickly. A lot of Nashville photography, which I did kind of when I moved here. I moved to the Nashville area in 2011 and thought, you know, I'm going to start shooting some of the architecture and things because maybe some tourists will want to go home and buy a print, you know, from their memories of Nashville. What in turn happened was the hotel boom. And all the hotels want to buy from local artists. And I have photographs in virtually every hotel in town. And a lot of restaurants too. This is kind of a fun one. This is tree fungus on a fallen log, which I love that kind of natural abstract kind of stuff. And this is a 30 by 45 print of that. And I'm not touching it. It's got a plastic sleeve over it, but that's cool. Shot that at Jekyll Island on Driftwood Beach, just some driftwood. This is one I shot just a few weeks ago. Seal, Alabama, similar to Union Level. I've always wanted to do a panorama of an abandoned community like this where all the buildings are represented. And this was my opportunity. But I couldn't get far enough back to get it in one shot, so I shot each one of these individually, right in the middle. And then I shot also the area where they join. And I'd never done this before, and I didn't know exactly what was going to happen. You know, Photoshop, I'm sure you all know, you can automatically do this with landscapes, but with buildings it wasn't quite that simple because of the perspective issues. Like, for instance, in the photo of this building, that awning actually goes that direction. So I did this all manually, blended it all together. I'm really happy with how that turned out. Shot that with my Fuji, which means that it's 40 inches by 130 inches, I think, something like that. A few more things to get through these. Just to give you an idea of what I like to shoot. Sorry, I put a lot of samples in here. That's another old abandoned school here in Tennessee. I can't remember the name of the community, but it's down around Lynchburg, I think, right? Shot that in North Carolina. You may be wondering why anyone would buy prints of these. Believe it or not, they do. I've sold a print of that one recently, and quite a few of these others. So, how did this become a sustainable photography business? And I want to tell you that when I started making photographs, taking it seriously, I never really had no concept of making a career out of it. But someone recommended I try putting my photographs on Etsy, make a few bucks, and I thought that sounds like a pretty good idea because camera stuff's expensive, you know. So if I can make a few bucks to pay for a lens, that's a good idea. But I had no career roadmap. I didn't know how to go about it, what you needed to do, or anything else. It took a long time for me to figure this out, making one mistake at a time after another, you know. I did go on Etsy, and on Etsy, and this was years ago, I don't think Etsy's the same anymore, but I began to get sales within a month or two, and then it turned into a lot of sales. Now keep in mind, I was selling these things for 20 bucks. So, you know, I would have people buy 10 or 15 to put in their office or whatever, and they were getting a real bargain. I didn't do the printing myself. I had it done at Miller's, and Miller's was great because they were affordable, they were quick, and I could reuse their packaging. So they would ship it to me, I'd pull it all out, check it, sign it, put it right back in, send it on to the customer. I found that customers like them to be signed. They would, I didn't used to sign them because to me it felt a little bit arrogant or whatever, but they requested that, so I started doing it. Etsy led to my first licensing deal. In 2008, I was contacted by Urban Outfitters. They bought this photograph that I took with a little, I think 8 megapixel camera in Seattle, of the Seattle Public Market sign. And I think what they liked about it was I shot it from the back. I'm not really sure, but I think that's the hook. I hate that photo because that thing is, that building is at an angle. I didn't have the trained eye in those days to recognize that, but anyways, there it is, unceremoniously dumped into a bin at Urban Outfitters in 2009. They pay me pretty well, and yeah, I thought to myself, hey, how can I make this happen on purpose? Because they found me, you know, and I had no concept of licensing a photograph or anything like that. They did all the printing. I got some samples directly from China, which was pretty cool, you know, arrived from Shanghai or whatever. So I began thinking about ways to make this into a career. And I think some of the secrets of my success, and I say that a little tongue-in-cheek, these are things I've just learned along the way. First of all, I love photography so much. I've already told you I'm kind of a nerd about it. So I've really dug into it and dedicated myself to it. And back when I was really enthusiastic about design and print, I would read every publication, whatever. That's how I was about photography. I have a dogged persistence. I never give up, even whenever it looks like it's just not going to work. I keep going. I'll talk more about that later. I always try to make a vision for what I want to have happen. So in other words, I do these weird exercises, like I'll do a word of the year, and I also make an annual plan every year. Like, what do I want to do this year? I want to try to get, I have a lot of people who ask me, where can I see your work in Nashville? They're coming in from out of town. I don't have anywhere in Nashville. I don't have a studio. I work from home. So one of my annual plans for several years, hasn't happened yet, is to get someplace in Nashville that has my work on the walls so people can go there. My big one, I think, is I have a prolific portfolio. That's the word somebody used once when they wrote a blog post about me. They call me prolific. I have a ton of work. I'm shooting all the time. When we don't go on proper vacations, we go on trips where I'm shooting all the time. Very frustrating for Tina, I know, but to me that's my idea of fun, and she's so gracious to go with me. But I'm always shooting and always working, and I have probably a couple thousand images on my website, but that's a small fraction of what I actually have. Which means that it's just like, I realized when I was on Etsy that I'm actually a photographer and a retailer. And it's like any other retail business, if people can't find what they want on your website, they'll go somewhere else. So I just feel lucky that I've got a lot of, you saw my work samples, there's a lot of interest for me and there's a lot of kind of work. And so people, if they Google and find me, they might come and buy something from me, and they often do. I have a strong online presence. What I mean by that is I do all the social media things, and like I said, I have YouTube and all that. I've talked to a lot of sort of enthusiastic photographers who want to do more, but they don't want to have anything to do with Instagram or social media. And while I get that, you got to be out there. That's all there is to it. If you're serious about it, you got to be out there. I don't have much of an Instagram presence. I think I have 1,400 followers, but I've still had some Instagram sales. And I still think people, when they're researching you, I said I was going to talk about my professional website a minute ago. That website was important to me because I knew if people were going to spend money with me, they needed to be able to trust who I was. That I work with a lot of interior designers. Some of them spend a lot of money with me, and I don't want them to wonder. They pay me up front. You know, I don't do any printing until the money's in the bank. So I wanted them to feel confident that I wasn't going to run off to, with their money. So it was important to me to have a professional website that made me look like I was trustworthy, but also they can go and find me elsewhere, kind of investigate me, see I've been around for a while. And I have a total dedication to customer service. Because I work with interior designers, these are people who are in business, and they want to buy art, but they also have deadlines, they have finicky clients, they have a lot of things like that. And coming from a graphic design background, I understand that. I pay attention to deadlines. I'll often work with them on the price if they're on a budget. Sometimes, like I was working with Belmont University, I brought the framed prints right to the office for them and delivered them. So, whatever it takes. Talk a minute about finding your style. Probably most of you don't need this information, but some of the younger photographers, I'm recording this for YouTube. Maybe someone will see it who's curious about style. I know that a lot of photographers ask, what is style, or how do you get one? And my personal opinion is that it comes with lots of work. That old axiom about it takes 10,000 hours to become excellent at something. I think it takes 10,000 hours to get a style. Style is the part of you that makes your work unique, is what I think. It comes through a lot of work. It's the subject matter. It's making consistent visual decisions when you're processing your images. It's how you use color, or in my case, black and white. Use of composition, use of line, shape, and form, how you use light, how your personal voice and viewpoint affects your images, and even the type and quality of your prints. Is there anyone in this room or anyone who follows photography who doesn't recognize the work of Deanne Arbus or Cindy Sherman or Gregory Crutzen or Edward Bertinsky? 4 photographers who have their work in galleries and in museums. 2 of them shoot black and white, 2 of them color, but none of them look the same as the others. You would never confuse Edward's work for Cindy Sherman's work. That's what I mean by, having a style and putting your viewpoint into it. I also would advise anyone who wants to sell prints to go to exhibits. I'm shocked by the number of photographers who never go to a photography exhibit or look at prints. You have to go see what a quality print looks like. I go to a lot. Tina goes with me to look at a lot of exhibitions. We go whenever we can. A lot of times it's amazing, the prints are not very big, famous prints, that you see in books that are this big and they're out of focus. But it's a nice print. So I made some key decisions along the way that I would like to say were on purpose, but I think they were by accident. One of them was I decided to shoot only in black and white fairly early on. There were a lot of reasons for this. The main reason was when I became a retailer and early on was selling my work, I knew from my branding background in advertising that if I did only black and white, people would recognize me more quickly. I see photographers who mix it up, and I think that confuses people. That's my opinion. That was one reason. The other reason was I could not figure out color management. My color prints were terrible. I mean, they really were. I started to print by myself and just couldn't get it to work. So it was just easier. Although I didn't know black and white's kind of tricky too sometimes. My working method is I shoot everything in color except if it's on film. I process it fully. I even go to the next step of enlarging with Adobe Enhanced Super Resolution, so I don't have to do that later. If someone wants to buy a very large print, it's already ready. This means I use a lot of storage space, especially with the Fuji. Those prints using Adobe Enhanced Super Resolution go to 80 inches wide. So they're quite large and take a lot of space on hard drives. Then I convert to black and white using various software and various methods, usually NIC, but there are other things too. And I archive religiously. I would never want to ever lose any work. And it's surprisingly to me, you hear about this in the news once in a while where a photographer's work has been stolen or burned or whatever and they didn't have any archive. Also, I'm dedicated to making the very best quality prints. This is a photograph of a print on Hanamura Photo Rag, 16 by 24. That's one of my favorite papers, but I use a lot of papers and I have tried a lot of papers and I brought some samples. By the way, I've got some flyers here about me. If anyone wants one, I'm happy to hand those out, but this is just some paper samples I bought. I do testing on my printer all the time with paper samples, so if you're curious, I'll start with you. Please pass it around.
Do you do limited edition?
I don't. That was just a mistake I made early on, didn't really know about it. Early on, I thought, you know, most fine art photographers, Cindy Sherman, for example, I don't know what her background is, but you know, a lot of those folks come from like a MFA background and they've got the right connections. That wasn't me. You know, I didn't have any of that kind of background. I knew maybe someday I would get in a gallery, and I've been in a few smaller ones, but if I was going to do anything, I was going to do it myself. And I'm also very shy and don't like networking very much because it requires talking to people. So it's just easier for me to do these things the way I'm doing it. So, yeah.
I'm curious about why do you think that was a mistake that you didn't edition them?
Oh, the editioning. Thank you for bringing it back to the question. Because I think there's a reason for editioning that's really smart when you're selling prints. I just never did it. I do have some on my website that I do call limited edition, and they are, but they don't seem to sell any better than the others. I think it would have been smart to limit the editions. One of the reasons is no gallery is going to touch my work now. They don't want to put something on their walls if you've got.
Everybody else
Mm.
knows.
Yeah, yeah. So that was one error that, you know, that I made that I
It's
wasn't
never
aware
too
of.
late to start.
That's true. That's true. Here's some, you've got paper samples. This is another photo of some prints, the same print on various papers. I don't know how well that shows, but there's a lot of difference in the brightness of the papers and the texture.
And the white.
Yeah.
Oh
Mhm.
my God.
Yeah. Speaking of whites, there are a lot of things I had to learn about printing and about papers along the way. I had to learn the difference between the surfaces, Baryta surface, satin, and cotton rag papers. What are OBAs and why do they matter? That has to do with brightness. Those are optical brightening agents. It's some kind of a chemical that they put in the papers usually to make it whiter. Now there are some papers out there that are very, very white these days. Arch 88 is one of them, and I've got a sample in there. I don't know how they did that. But OBAs are questionable because no one knows really what they're going to do later on with the print. Right now, if you put a print onto a piece of paper that's got a lot of OBAs in it and it's very bright white, and you put it behind a piece of museum glass, it dims because it fluoresces in light, and so that's cutting the UV light. I won't try to say any more than that because I'm not that educated on it, but I had to learn which papers are more commonly carried by print suppliers, and that was important to me because I make my own prints, but I also buy out prints that are a certain size or above, and I wanted to make sure that the paper I use is what they're using. So in other words, I didn't want to change it up. I had to learn about color spaces and color management and all that stuff, ICC profiles, and how to get neutral black and white prints. Key decision number 2, getting the professional website. I already talked about that, so I won't dwell on that, but the main reason there was e-commerce and also so that I looked respectable to people who were coming to buy prints. I try to operate like a business as well. I mean, I think a lot of people who are artists or artistic types don't think about this, but I built my website using SEO, and somehow, some ways that affects what I do is using descriptive photo names. So rather than naming something with like a very evocative artistic name that's vague or unclear, I give it descriptive names so that Google can find me. It's not very romantic, but that's what works. When somebody's searching, I want them to be able to find me. I'm very careful with pricing. Obviously, I want to make as much as I can. printing paper and all this stuff's quite expensive. And, you have to make a profit if you want to make a living. I work a lot with interior designers, people like that, who are also working with budgets. And most of the time, frankly, they don't seem to care what the price is. If they need it for a client, they've got the money. But sometimes you do have to be sensitive about that. Again, show up often on social media, promote your work, and define who your customers are. Promoting your work is a big one for me because being a shy person and also a modest person, I never wanted to be anywhere in this. I wanted my work to be out, to be seen by people, and when people like my photographs, I didn't even want to have anybody even know who I was, which may sound weird, but over the years, people encouraged me to put more of myself into it, and they were right. People want to buy from people who they know or like, or at least have some understanding of who they are. About 2 or 3 years ago, there was a big study published from, I think, Art News. This woman did a global study from all the high net worth individuals who buy art, not photography, but just art in general. People with $1 million or more of expendable income who spend like $50,000 or more per year on art. And one of the questions was, why do you buy art? And the top 2 categories weren't, investment or anything like that. It was 1, to support artists, and 2, to get to know the artist or to know who they are, to identify with the artist, in other words. So it's important to put yourself out there to a certain extent, which is another reason social media is necessary. And that was one that was really hard for me to swallow, and that's one of the reasons I'm here tonight. Provide exceptional customer service. I reply to phone calls and emails promptly. I think probably every single interior designer who emails me thanks me for responding so promptly. That must be something that they don't get a lot. I pay attention to deadlines. I never miss them if possible. I'm courteous and professional. I remember details like making sure the packaging is durable, and I offer free shipping, which is obviously built into the price, but it makes people feel better. Key decision number 3, never, ever, ever give up if this is something you want. I can't tell you how many creative people I've worked with, either in design or whatever, who got frustrated in life and gave up. Super talented people, more talented than me ever. But for whatever reason, they got frustrated. Maybe they weren't making enough money, or they hadn't achieved something, and they went to do something else. And you can't get there if you give up. Also, I added this at the last minute, never stop learning. I feel like I told you I've learned a lot about photography just studying on my own. I feel like one of the things that's really important is to not only learn about photography, but learn what other people are doing. One of the reasons I have pictures in Grey's Anatomy, I've also had pictures in several movies and various other things, because this young lady who I really admired her work, I kind of followed her for a while and saw what she was doing, and she put a picture of her photograph that was in Sex and the City, the movie. And I thought, wow, that's pretty cool. I didn't know that was something you could do. So I checked into it, and I sent some JPEGs off to a firm that does that in California, and they pulled me in, and that's how I got into Grey's Anatomy and some of these other things. So I learned a little bit from watching what she did. She was kind of 2 steps ahead of me on everything. Kind of copied her a little bit, this other photographer. She was also really, really good. The importance of vision for photography and for your business. This kind of goes back to what I said a minute ago about having a word of the year and a plan. I always try to make a vision for what do I want to accomplish. What are my goals? And I mean this kind of on a big level. But also, what do I want to accomplish with my business? What is the vision for my business? What am I about, and what is my business about? I think about that a lot, and I think that's important. Key decision number 4, and this is the single most important thing. I've already sort of said this, but I have a lot of work on my website. And I found that having a lot of work is one thing, but also you have to talk about it in various ways so that people find it. I noticed that, like, if I do a blog post about one of my photographs, it's more likely to sell than if I just put it out there and leave it alone. Speaking of blogs, blogging is still an effective thing. I don't know if y'all do it or ever read any, but it's amazing how much attention can come to you because of blogging. So I do that pretty regularly as well. And that's all I've got. Thank you very much for coming. Does anybody have any comments or questions? Yeah.
Tell me about when you said you have the framed art. Do you have a style that you want in your mats and your frames, or do you just leave that up to whoever's?
Most of the time I'm selling prints. So in the circumstance with Belmont, I talked to them about what they had in mind. Luckily, it sort of coincided with what I like, which is a simple black frame and a white mat. I think that's what most photographers prefer. There are trends in how this is done. I think white frames have been really popular the last few years. I think that looks great too. I very rarely ever see how the prints turn out. Very rarely. Like I showed you the ones from that business on the wall. That's very rare that anyone ever takes. Even if they say they will, they never do. Occasionally someone will send me one from their house and I'm usually, oh my God. I wish I had seen that, yeah. But that's, it's whatever your taste is, that's okay. If it was up to me, they would be always very simply, the photograph is the star, right? So the mat should be plain, it should protect the work. It also looks really great when they put it in just a black frame with the spacers, and I've seen that done a lot recently. I think that looks really great. But yeah, I don't like doing the framing because it's just a pain, and I have to work with the framer, and it just gets complicated, and I'm kind of lazy. So, but I'll do it if it's necessary. In this case, I was happy I did. Question?
Yes, so somebody also asked the question about your formula for pricing.
Mhm.
And so in the business class that we teach at Nashville State, we base the pricing structure on cost of doing business.
Yes. Mhm.
And it's a lot easier to kind of figure that out
Mhm.
for a commercial or retail photographer.
Right.
How do you go about kind of figuring out your cost of doing business and your formula for
My
pricing
formula is
for-
essentially very simple. I get all the expenses together and I triple it, and that's what I charge. And I do that because it's simple. It's not always exact. So in other words, some prints are more trouble to deal with. When they get to be 7 feet, that's a lot of work and effort, so I charge more for that. Small prints I actually undercharge for. My philosophy from the beginning was I want anyone to be able to afford one of my photographs if they really want one. So like the 8x10s and 8x12s, I undercharge, I think.
So when you talk about putting all your prices together,
Mhm.
are you talking about just the physical action of making the print, or are you talking about your travel, your time?
Everything.
Your film?
Yeah, it's hard to really-
Your camera, your computer?
Some things are really like, okay, so travel. I'll take 10,000 photographs on a trip. So it's really hard to go back and figure out exactly, but yes, I try to work it all in as much as I can. Same with making a print. How do you calculate, like I know how much a sheet of paper costs. They're $8 for Hanamula. But how about the ink? That's hard because, it's just, I've never found anybody who gives a good, like, what does it cost for ink? And ink's expensive. So yeah, I just do the best I can. So, and I said I take whatever the expenses are and multiply it times 3, but a lot of times it's more than that, maybe times 4. Just kind of depends. And I would like to charge more, and I probably will pretty soon because a lot of things have gone up. My particular website is difficult to update prices. It's very hand intensive. So committing to a new price it's a process. It takes me several weeks to get that all done just for one price. So, but.
And I was going to ask you about your website too,
Mhm.
because you talked about the importance of having that
Mhm.
professional
Mhm.
website. Was that a website that you designed yourself or hired a designer to do?
Okay,
or-
so I know you've all heard of Squarespace. How could you not? I looked at Squarespace and I looked at Shopify. My website's on Shopify, and I did that because it's built around e-commerce. That has some pros and some cons. One of the cons is what I just said. It's made for a product listing, and then another product listing, and another product listing. And what that means is I used to have a website on something called Photo Shelter, which I think is still around. Photo Shelter has this brilliant way of doing it where you can take a batch of photos and upload it all in a big batch and then apply a pricing model to them all. And if you want to change the pricing, go back to your pricing model and you change your 8x10 and it applies to all of them down the line. My website doesn't do that, unfortunately. It's more like a spreadsheet kind of thing in the back end where you can go down and you can take your 16x24s and you can one by one just go down the row and change them. But it's still, when you have my volume of work, it's a process.
Right, because you're doing all of your print fulfillment yourself, correct?
Yes. Mhm.
Okay, and that brings me one other question, then I'll stop with the questions.
That's okay.
Let somebody else ask. What printer are you using?
My physical printer or print shop?
Yeah, like Canon, Epson?
I have an Epson SC 5000, I think is what it's called. It's 17 by whatever. It does 17-inch wide prints. And it makes really nice prints, but I also farm out anything bigger than that to either chromatics or white wall, or there are several others, depending on what it is. There are, white wall won't do above 40 by 60, I think it is, but chromatics does. And there's a company out in Las Vegas that I've used for very, very large prints, but their customer service is a little spotty, so I try not to go to them if I don't have to.
So when you send those big print orders out, you're getting the print back and you're looking at the prints before you're sending it to the
Correct.
customer?
Mm-hmm, yep. And I have to do that because
Yeah.
there's an amazing number of them that come back with a problem.
Yeah.
Either they got damage in shipping or, various other things. Even white wall, which I think is one of the best printers going. Are y'all familiar with white wall?
No.
Based in Germany, believe it or not. They can get, this is funny, they can get a print to me from Germany faster than I can get it from Chromatics. And it comes to my door rather than having to go and pick it up. So they do really great work. They're Hanamula certified, as is Chromatics. But occasionally they come damaged from Germany, and they usually arrive in 4 days, believe it or not, or somewhere around there.
And I noticed in your print, in your paper sample, you had a lot of Canson
Yeah.
papers.
Mhm.
So well, I guess if you're making the 17-inch ones, you're buying the paper.
Mhm.
And
I don't
where
use that much
are you-
Canson paper. I
Okay.
put that in there because I do a lot of printing, test printing,
Uh-huh.
and I buy 8.5 by 11 sheets, and that's what I had. I don't have an 8.5 by 11 Hanamula because I print larger sheets and I didn't want to cut it down, if I'm being
Yeah, we
honest.
know how expensive that is.
Yeah, so that's why there's not much Hanamula in there, but, so I'm sorry, what was your question?
I don't know, I think I was just gonna ask, maybe where you're buying your papers from. Are you, like, the ones that you're printing?
Mhm.
You're printing yourself?
Yeah, I get it
your
from
studio.
B&H.
Okay.
And so white wall has the same papers. They're Hanamula certified. They're fast. The quality is exceptionally good. The prints are always astounding. But occasionally, you can tell that somebody was careless in the packaging or whatever it is. So, and that happens with others as well. There are a couple of places. I did a big test about 2 years ago where I sent that photograph you saw, the rose. I think you saw that one on the stem. I sent that to about 8 or 9 different print shops, and they got the exact same size print. Ordered through the online thing, and as they started coming back, they all looked real similar to each other, and they didn't all have the same exact paper, so I had to just get as close as I could. I like the Barita papers, so ordered on, Plateen fiber rag if that's what they had or whatever. But some of them weren't clear on the fact that if you order a 12 by 18-inch print with a half-inch margin, it's coming out of your print size. So in other words, I didn't get a 12 by 18-inch print. I got a 17 by whatever it was, because the margin comes out. And that wasn't clear, and that's very frustrating me, and I don't want to do that math, so I don't print with people who do that. It's just, mm-mm.
I have a question about the shooting.
Yeah.
So you showed your film cameras or some of them, and that was just for fun.
Mhm.
So are all your prints are they all digital,
No.
or have you scanned?
I do
negatives?
have quite a few film images on my website,
Mhm.
and they are either drum scanned or sometimes I'll shoot them with my digital camera through the negative, which works pretty well. I know that sounds funny, but
And I saw on your website, I think that you do some traditional darkroom prints too, on
Yeah.
request.
yeah. Mhm. That okay. So I have a small dark room that I fool around in. Those prints are very small. I do offer those, but no, they never sell. But you can have, I don't like telling people this because it sounds it's cheating, but you can have a digital image printed onto silver paper at Digital Silver, and that's where I have that done. There are a couple other places. I think actually Whitewall does it too. So it's essentially a laser printer that you know what I'm talking about. It prints onto a piece of black and white paper, and it goes through the chemicals and comes to you. And they'll also sepia tone them or whatever if you want for an extra cost. I used to offer that on my website as an alternative, but I don't really anymore. It's there, but it's not emphasized. Honestly, the inkjet prints are so good now, I don't see a reason to.
The tonal range from.
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious, you mentioned that you're shy periodically tonight. And how have you gotten into the hotels in town? Because that seems like a non-shy thing.
No, I mean, no, I don't do
It's all
anything. It all happens through Google, I'm assuming. People find me online and they send me an email and say, we're working with a hotel, we'd love to use your prints, you know, can you contact us? And I do. I mean, you can ask Tina, the ones I dread are the ones that say, call me. I don't want to call. We'll email if that's okay. I know that's weird, but I'm just very, very shy.
So you've never used like an artist rep or gotten in with a design firm that specializes in that?
The artist rep I used was the one that got me into the movies in California. She had a gallery, and she did have my work in her gallery for a while. But she was really more emphasized on local artists, so eventually that just sort of fell apart. She was the only artist rep I've ever had. And I have used a couple of firms that, talking about fulfill your own, who would, you would send them the TIFFs, and they would put prints out all over the place on Walmart.com and all this kind of stuff. But I got cheated by some of those folks, and so I pulled out of that market. One of the keys for me has always been multiple streams of income. You know, find various ways to make money. Preferably passive income is great, you know, because you don't have to do anything for it. But I found that having to have other people have your TIFFs was just a risky proposition. They don't always pay you what they owe you. So,
Do you get a lot of repeat customers from your interior designers?
Yeah, I don't get a lot, but I have some. I have a guy in Atlanta who comes back to me often, and I had a gal, I haven't worked with her since the pandemic, but when several states, this is going to sound funny, but several states were legalizing marijuana, and there were a lot of pharmacies opening around, and she somehow got the business of putting photographs in these the cannabis pharmacies, and she would buy 20 or 30 prints at a time, usually not too big, you know, maybe 12 by 18s, but she needed them quickly. And so I would order them through Miller, have them sent directly to her. It's one of the few times I don't proof them because she needed them so quickly. I said, here's the deal, you can get them by day after tomorrow, but I won't see them first. And she was okay with that, so. And she worked with me for quite a while until the pandemic, I guess, maybe took her out of business. I'm not sure, I haven't heard from her.
You talked about the different sizes. Do you have a set of different sizes? If I said that right. I mean, do you from 5x7s to 60?
Yeah, I offer a variety of sizes, which I think is also a big advantage on the website. And I sell a lot of large prints, believe it or not. When I set up, I thought for sure everybody would be 12 by 18 or smaller. That's rare, honestly. Even individuals who are buying photographs, not designers, but just a regular person, they tend to buy 30 by 45 or rarely 40 by 60, but sometimes. You know, usually it's maybe a 20 by 30 to 30 by 45 seems to be my most popular range.
And when they go to your website, let's say they pick the rows, can they get it in a 5x7 and then a 50 by 80, or is it, do you have specific prints that you only have certain sizes?
Yeah, it depends a lot on the camera I used. I still have some old photographs on my website that were taken with an Olympus 4/3 camera, so you know they only go up to 16 by 20 or something like that. Surprisingly, those are the ones people always want large. You know, that's the way it works. It's embarrassing to have to say, sorry, that won't work. Yeah, so I give the sizes that I think it will print well at, and then people will ask a lot of times if I can do a custom size, which I'm happy to do. But if they want it larger than I'm recommending, I always explain to them that it may get a little soft. You know, which honestly on the wall, no one's ever going to notice, but I'm always real sensitive about someone opening up the packaging and going, ugh, that doesn't look good, you know. Yeah. So that's why I'm always chasing more resolution, because I want it to look great from here or from over there. And I do like large prints. I think they look amazing. Yes.
So you mentioned that your black and whites are originally in color, and you. So what's the advantage of transforming them that way as opposed to just shooting it straight digitally black and white?
I'm glad you asked that question because I meant to talk about that. So a lot of the color photographs that I process, I save them as TIFFs. I could go back and make a good print off of those. That's how far I go with them. But a lot of them I've learned to see in black and white. So there are certain situations, especially like, take the example of maybe an abandoned barn sitting in a green field with green trees. In black and white, all those tones sort of merge together. The barn and the trees and the grass sort of all become gray. So I will often manipulate the green, or in some cases, if it's wintertime, the grass may be yellow, let's say. I'll either desaturate or increase saturation, or maybe I'll go in and change the luminance so that the greens will be brighter and then the barn will look darker, or vice versa. So I'm manipulating the colors to get the black and white tones I want ultimately. Yeah.
Okay.
And I also am not a fan of, like Ansel Adams did this where the sky's black, or very close to black in a lot of his images, and I think it looks amazing, but I like the sky to look like it's got light in it. So a lot of times when you convert to black and white, the sky is going nearly black. If it's a deep blue sky, I'll go in and add more luminance to that blue and desaturate it so that it becomes more of a gray, because I don't like that look of the sky being black most of the time. That's just a personal thing. Thanks for asking.